The day started off just like any other, but it took an unexpected turn by the time it came to an end. After a long day at work, I returned home feeling the weight of the world on my shoulders. Upon parking the car in the driveway, I immediately noticed something out of the ordinary. The garage door was slightly open, and movement caught my eye. A sense of unease crept over me, prompting me to trust my instincts and investigate. As I cautiously made my way to the garage, my heart raced with anticipation. Stepping inside, what I saw in the dim light changed everything. There stood my wife Sarah, locked in an embrace with Mark, the mechanic. Lost in their own world, they were oblivious to my presence, leaving me frozen in shock and disbelief. Time seemed to stand still as I processed the scene before me, the sound of my racing heart drowning out everything else. The sight of their intimacy felt like a sharp stab to my chest, leaving me questioning how it could have come to this. My mind raced as I grappled with this painful revelation. As I reflected on the years we had spent together, the trust we had nurtured, and the seemingly unbreakable love between us, a series of increasingly painful questions plagued my mind. In that moment, everything we had built together disintegrated before my eyes like fragile glass. The intensity of the betrayal left me breathless, my world swirling with disbelief and hurt. I longed to unleash my pent-up emotions, to confront the one who had caused this devastation right then and there. But instead, I found myself taking a step back, the weight of their actions descending upon me like a suffocating fog. As I struggled to process the harsh reality of the betrayal, a deep sense of sickness settled in my stomach, gnawing at me with a relentless ache. How could she willingly shatter our vows, our bond, in such a devastating manner? The thought of facing her filled me with a turbulent mix of anger and sorrow, my heart racing with the anticipation of the confrontation that awaited. Hours passed as I paced back and forth in our living room, replaying the painful scene in my mind, searching for any semblance of understanding in the chaos. I felt like a fool, my trust shattered in the cruelest way possible. Summoning the courage to finally address the betrayal, I called out her name, each syllable tinged with a heavy burden of hurt and confusion. As I walked into the house, my voice quivering with emotion, she emerged in the hallway, her complexion pale and her eyes wide with shock. I sensed panic overtaking her as she realized that I was aware of the situation. "We need to talk," I said firmly. "What do you mean?" she stuttered, attempting to feign innocence, but her guilt was evident in her expression. I couldn't fathom how she believed she could keep it a secret from me. "I saw you," I declared, my voice unwavering despite the turmoil I felt inside. "I saw you with Mark in the garage. How could you?" The last word caught in my throat, a tear escaping down my cheek. I was furious, wounded, and utterly betrayed. She opened her mouth to respond, but no words emerged. I watched the wheels turn in her head as she searched for a rationale, a way to justify the inexplicable. "It's not what it seems," she eventually managed to utter, a note of desperation creeping into her voice. "Not what it seems?" I echoed, incredulous. "You were in his arms, Sarah. How can you deny that you were intimate with him?" The words left a bitter taste in my mouth. "I was lonely," she retorted indignantly. "You're always absent, constantly immersed in work. When I needed someone and he needed someone, you chose to betray me." I interjected, my heart pounding with anger. "That's your justification? Couldn't approach me and discuss it. Instead, you resorted to secrecy like a coward." Tears welled up in her eyes, briefly revealing a hint of remorse before turning defensive. "You don't understand. Your focus on work made me feel deserted." The conversation deteriorated into a back and forth of accusations and explanations. Despite hoping to salvage our marriage and work through the betrayal, the harsh reality loomed above us like a shadow. The suffocating feeling of hopelessness seeped in. At the peak of the argument, a sudden clarity washed over me. I refused to be the victim any longer. I wanted to reclaim my power. With this newfound resolve, I made a life-changing decision to take our car and leave. It was a small act of retribution, but it felt like the only aspect of the situation I could influence in a moment where I felt completely powerless. The confrontation concluded suddenly, leaving both of us stunned and overwhelmed by the emotional aftermath. I could observe Sarah's expression shifting as she realized the gravity of the situation, a blend of fear and bewilderment. Upon turning away from her, my thoughts raced, fueled by adrenaline surging through my veins. Transitioning from a wounded husband to a state of deliberate determination, I devised a plan and resolved to carry it out. Exiting the house in a hurry, my heart thudding, I headed towards the garage. The car sat there, polished under the bright fluorescent lights, seemingly unaffected by the inner turmoil raging within me. That car had always held a special place in my heart. symbolizing our shared dreams and life together. However, it now felt like a burden, a constant reminder of the betrayal that had shattered our world. As I settled into the driver's seat, a surge of empowerment washed over me. I felt capable of taking this one thing away from her. I could have left her stranded without a way to escape the mess she had caused. It may have been a small and spiteful act, but it belonged to me. I started the car engine, which roared to life, drowning out the chaos in my head. In that moment, I was seizing control and piecing back some of my shattered pride. Driving away from the house was like a dream. The streets rushed past me, my thoughts moving quicker than the car. I didn't have a destination in mind, but it didn't matter. All that mattered was putting distance between myself and the heartache that lingered behind. Traveling down familiar roads, I felt a strange blend of freedom and sorrow. I was liberated from her betrayal, yet the void in my heart echoed louder than the engine's roar. With every mile I covered, I couldn't shake the sense of impending consequences. Leaving Sarah stranded was more than just getting back at her. It was about making a statement. I wanted her to feel the impact of her decisions, to comprehend the aftermath of her choices. I needed her to realize that I wouldn't be passive anymore. I have willingly participated in this betrayal. My intentions were to make her suffer, even if just a little, for the pain she inflicted upon me. Eventually, I found myself parked in a secluded area away from prying eyes. Taking a deep breath, I allowed myself to reflect on the recent events. The anger that had driven me slowly dissipated, replaced by a creeping sense of dread. What had I turned into? I was a man consumed by betrayal, willing to harm the woman I had once cherished in an attempt to regain my sense of self. It was a bitter realization. I thought of Sarah at home, likely in tears or filled with anger. I had left her without a car, without a means of transportation, without me. I envisioned her reaching out to friends or family for assistance, only to face inquiries and criticism. Would she feel regret? Would she understand the seriousness of her actions? Or would she simply lay blame on me for her situation? As I sat there, a twinge of guilt washed over me. Perhaps I had been too severe. I had loved her in the past, and despite everything, part of me still held onto that love. But as the image of her with Mark, the intimacy they shared, and the heartbreaking betrayal flooded my mind, I tried to shake off the doubts. I reminded myself that sticking to my plan was crucial for my self-preservation and to ensure she understood the consequences of her actions. After what seemed like an eternity of inner turmoil, I made the decision to head back. Maneuvering the car onto the road with a heavy heart, I couldn't help but wonder what awaited me at home. Would she be there remorseful and apologetic, or would she confront me with defiant anger? Uncertain but determined, I prepared to face whatever lay ahead. Pulling into the driveway, a knot formed in my stomach as the quietness of the house struck me as almost eerie. Stepping out of the car, I steeled myself for what was to come. With my choice made, I braced myself for the confrontation, my heart torn between anticipation and dread. I was about to face the reality of my actions and their impact. When I entered, the tension was thick between us. Sarah's face displayed a blend of anger and shock in the living room. Took the car, she accused loudly, her voice escalating. I drew in a breath, preparing to explain, but the weight of the situation lingered heavily. I had left her stranded, leaving her to face the consequences of her actions. Would she comprehend the pain she had caused? The air in the room felt charged, foreshadowing an impending storm. Sarah remained with her arms crossed, eyes filled with fury and disbelief, as if challenging me to rationalize my actions in the midst of our turmoil. "Why did you take the car?" she repeated, her voice quivering with righteous anger. She saw it as a form of retribution, but I knew it wasn't a solution to our shared chaos. The words I spoke cut through the room, sharp and devoid of empathy for the pain she had caused. Taking a moment to carefully select my words, I confronted her, maintaining a steady voice. "Do you believe I'm punishing you?" I inquired. "You betrayed me, Sarah. You chose to be intimate with the one person I trusted, and now you expect me to pity you." Sarah opened her mouth to reply. Recognition slowly registered on her face. She had overstepped the boundary and was now facing the repercussions. "This isn't fair," she protested, her voice now softer and almost pleading. "I made a mistake, but taking the car won't solve anything. It will only make matters worse." Her words ignited a surge of anger within me. "Do you think this is about making things worse for you?" I shot back. "I am trying to make you comprehend the gravity of your actions. This is about accountability, Sarah. You must grasp that choices have consequences." She turned away in frustration, her hand combing through her hair. "You are acting vengeful," she accused me. I acknowledge my error, but this isn't the right approach here. Your current actions are only exacerbating the situation for both of us. Her words were painful. I didn't intend to seek revenge, but rather to regain some sense of control. I wanted her to grasp the gravity of her betrayal and comprehend the depth of my pain. Yet, as we stood in the silence of our home, doubts crept in. Perhaps I have gone too far, I confessed, my voice lowering. Regardless, you must understand that I cannot simply overlook this. You have wounded me, Sarah. You have violated our commitments. I cannot pretend everything is fine. As I spoke, she gazed at me, and briefly, I glimpsed a hint of remorse in her eyes. I'm sorry, she murmured softly. I never meant for any of this to happen. I was lonely, and Mark was there. I didn't foresee it leading to this. Infuriated, I snapped. Leading to what exactly? You lying in bed with another man? Betraying everything we built together? I questioned her lack of foresight. The silence that followed was overwhelming. We stood there, locked in a tangled web of pain and deception, weighed down by our shared history. The suffocating heaviness of the moment made me long to flee from the dense fog of lingering hurt that hung in the air. However, escape was not an option. I had committed to facing the situation head-on. I needed Sarah to confront the consequences of her actions and grasp the extent of her betrayal. I required time, Sarah, I asserted firmly after a prolonged silence. Time to unravel my thoughts and determine the implications of this for us. I can't simply forgive and forget. Not after what transpired. Sarah's reaction was one of quiet acknowledgement as tears threatened to spill from her eyes. I comprehend, she murmured softly. But please don't leave me in uncertainty. I am willing to do whatever it takes to make amends. My head shook in response. Mere words were not sufficient. Actions would speak volumes. You must demonstrate your understanding, I emphasized. You need to prove to me that you truly comprehend the gravity of your actions. With a mix of conflicting emotions swirling inside me, I turned to exit the room, leaving a tense atmosphere in my wake. Once, a tumult of emotions swirled within me, anger, hurt, and a flicker of hope. Part of me yearned to believe her, holding on to the possibility of mending our fractured marriage. Nevertheless, the haunting image of her entwined with Mark prevailed in my thoughts, a grim testament to the shattered trust between us. As I made my way into the kitchen, the palpable silence of the house enveloped me, amplifying the turmoil within. Retrieving a bottle of water from the fridge, my hands trembled as I sought to calm my racing heart. Contemplation beckoned, urging me to process the recent events. It dawned on me then, my anger was not solely directed at Sarah. I harbored resentment towards myself for overlooking the warning signs, for naively trusting her, only to be blindsided by the very person I leaned on. Seated at the kitchen table, thoughts raced about the actions needed to convey the gravity of the situation to Sarah. Thus, as I pondered the next move, I pondered what actions to take to ensure she comprehended the repercussions of her choices. When I took the car, it felt like I had also taken a piece of our shared life. Sarah was unable to easily travel, and I could sense the strain in our interactions at home. It seemed like we were existing in separate spheres, both burdened by the decisions that had led to this situation. Observing Sarah adapt to her new circumstances, it was evident that not having the car meant she had to rely on others for rides. A friend here, a family member there. The frustration in her eyes and the challenges she faced adjusting to this sudden change were clear. Despite the difficulty, I understood deep down that this action was necessary. I wanted her to fully grasp the consequences of her betrayal. Every time she requested to use the car, I took a sense of satisfaction. She would plead, I need it for work, her desperation apparent. Yet I remained resolute, reminding her of the choices she made. The nightly silence in our home echoed the turmoil we were both facing. Sarah sought solace amidst the chaos we had brought upon ourselves, while I grappled with the weight of my decisions. Despite a newfound sense of control, I began to realize the toll it was taking on both of us. Sarah's isolation grew, with fewer visits from friends and unanswered phone calls. As I observed dwindling, I could discern the solitude reflected in her eyes. While a part of me found satisfaction in her distress, another part of me was burdened with a pang of remorse. Was I being too unyielding? Had I transformed into the antagonist of our narrative? One evening, as I sat in the living room, Sarah approached me with a vulnerability more pronounced than I had seen in weeks. Can we have a conversation? She asked softly, her voice tinged with a hint of trepidation. It was evident that she was grappling with the right words to say, and for the first time, a glimmer of optimism lit up within me. Perhaps this could be the moment where we could start to mend the fractured facets of our relationship. Talk about what? I responded, my demeanor cautious. I was hesitant to drop my defenses too swiftly. About us. About what transpired, she articulated, her gaze searching mine for empathy. I acknowledged my mistakes, and I've been contemplating how to rectify them, but I need your assistance. I raised an eyebrow, intrigued yet still vigilant. You expect me to aid you? Do you believe that a simple apology will restore everything to how it once was, Sarah? Life isn't that straightforward. I don't think so, she quickly responded, frustration seeping into her voice. But I'm prepared to do whatever it takes to regain your trust. I'll attend counseling, talk to my friends about it, whatever you need. She paused, her voice wavering. I don't want to lose you. Her heartfelt words struck me deeply. I could sense the sincerity in her eyes, the urgency of someone who had come to terms with the weight of their wrongdoing. But could I truly trust her again? Could I believe that she was genuinely committed to repairing the damage done? I'm not sure, Sarah. I confessed, my voice barely above a whisper. You shattered my trust. It's not something that can be easily fixed. I acknowledge that, she replied, her tone resolute. But I'm willing to give it my all. I'm determined to improve, to demonstrate that I can change. An array of conflicting emotions surged within me. A part of me yearned to trust her once more, to allow her that opportunity to make things right, while another part stewed in indignation, still wounded by the breach of trust. I couldn't simply switch off those feelings. They were now a part of me. Why should I trust you? I asked firmly. You had plenty of chances to approach me, to discuss your emotions. Instead, you chose to be intimate with someone else. How do I know this isn't just another empty promise? She paused, taking a deep breath as tears welled up in her eyes. Because I'm here admitting my mistakes. I'm not seeking forgiveness now, but an opportunity to demonstrate that I can be the partner you deserve. I understand it will require time, but I'm ready to fight for us. Her vulnerability resonated with me deeply. I could sense her fear of losing what we had worked on together. It was a stark contrast to her earlier defiance. Despite the emotional impact, my walls of protection remained intact. Time means nothing without meaningful action, I spoke slowly. You must prove to me that you are truly committed to this. Mere words won't be enough. I'll do whatever it takes. Just please don't give up on me yet. As she stood there, vulnerability etched on her face, I felt the weight of my own decisions pressing down on me. I was still angry, still hurt, but perhaps there was a glimmer of hope buried beneath the pain. I didn't want to be the villain in our story, but I also couldn't ignore the betrayal that had cut so deeply. Let's see how this plays out, I finally said, my voice softer now. But know that I won't make it easy for you. Trust takes time, and you shattered mine. She nodded, relief and determination flooding her expression. I understand, and I'll do everything I can to earn it back. As I watched her walk away, I felt a strange mix of emotions. The road ahead would be long and fraught with challenges, or perhaps, just perhaps, there was a way to navigate it together. The days turned into weeks, and the tension between Sarah and me slowly began to shift. As I grappled with feelings of betrayal, I observed her sincere efforts to rebuild the bridges that had been burned. Each small gesture and commitment she made towards change offered a glimmer of hope for healing. However, my caution and guardedness lingered. Sarah began attending counseling sessions, both individually and eventually with me at her side. The therapist emphasized the importance of open communication, leading me to reluctantly share my pent-up anger and pain. Confronting these emotions was challenging but essential for our progress. One evening during the session, I expressed my disbelief at her actions and the profound impact of her betrayal on my trust. I acknowledged the difficulty in moving past it. Sarah's response was heartfelt, admitting her regret and expressing her dedication to self-improvement. As our sessions progressed, I began to soften slightly as I delved into understanding the motivations behind my choices and how to avoid repeating them. There were moments where her vulnerability made me reassess my initial judgments. Could there be a path towards forgiveness and moving forward together? However, at times, waves of pain would hit me unexpectedly, plunging me back into despair. Triggered by reminders of our past happiness, such as a picture or a familiar song, memories would flood back, stirring up anger and causing me to question everything all over again. One evening, upon returning home, I found Sarah at the dining table surrounded by papers. With a tentative smile, she suggested working on a new budget together to help with our tight finances. As skepticism crept in, I pondered whether budgeting was truly her intention. You want to focus on the present moment? She inquired, her voice unwavering. I want us to work together as a team once more. I'm determined to show you my commitment in making things right. It might seem ordinary, but it's a vital part of rebuilding our life together. I sighed, feeling the gravity of her words. I appreciate your effort, but we must address the more significant issues first. Can't just brush aside what happened. Understanding my hesitation, she nodded. You're right. Perhaps we should also discuss how to rebuild trust in other aspects. I aim to be open with you to prove my dedication to change. As we delved into our financial matters, I couldn't shake off the sense that we were skirting around the real underlying problems. The betrayal was still raw, and while I recognized her attempts, I was cautious about fully embracing them. I wished to believe that we could mend our relationship, yet the wounds from her infidelity ran deep. Later that night, as I lay in bed, I found myself pondering our predicament. I had taken the first steps in recognizing our hurdles, but there was still much more work ahead. In the car, as a means of asserting control, a way to make her feel the consequences of her actions. But now, as I watched her work to rebuild our life, I wondered if I had been too harsh. Was isolation truly the answer, or was it just a way for me to avoid confronting my pain? In the following days, I began to soften my stance. I agreed to let Sarah use the car for certain errands under the condition that she would keep me updated on her whereabouts. It was a small concession, but felt like a step in the right direction. I could see that she was genuinely trying to earn back my trust, and I began to feel a flicker of hope. But as we moved forward, I also knew I had to be vigilant. I couldn't allow myself to be naive again, but let my guard down completely. I had to protect my heart while still allowing space for healing. One evening, as we sat together on the couch, I turned to her with my heart racing. I want to believe that we can get through this, but I need you to be completely honest with me. There are any lingering feelings for Mark I need to know now. She looked at me, her expression serious. There aren't any feelings for him. I made a terrible mistake and I regret it every day. I want to be with you and I'm committed to making things right. I searched her eyes for any hint of deception, but all I saw was sincerity. Okay then, let's work on this together, I said, feeling the sense of resolve wash over me. But know that it's going to take time and I'm going to need to see consistent effort from you. I understand, she replied, her voice softening. I'm ready to do whatever it takes. As we sat there together, I felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps we could rebuild what had been lost piece by piece. But I knew that the road ahead would be long and fraught with challenges. Trust was not something that could be restored overnight. It would take patience and commitment from both of us. As the weeks turned into months, the journey of rebuilding our relationship was anything but linear. There were days filled with laughter and moments of joy shared between us brightened our days. However, on other occasions, the shadows of past betrayals resurfaced, stirring up painful memories. Each day felt like a delicate dance as we tried to move forward while still grappling with our turbulent history. Despite the challenges, Sarah remained committed to our healing journey, actively participating in counseling sessions and engaging in heartfelt conversations about her emotions and our relationship. Witnessing her transformation, not just in actions but in her overall demeanor, was heartening. She became more present, more involved, demonstrating a genuine dedication to making things right. Yet, a lingering sense of distrust weighed on me, reminding me that rebuilding trust takes time. Reflecting on a delightful evening spent laughing together, I contemplated the future. I had allowed her more freedom with the car, a step towards normalcy, but I wrestled with the consequences of my leniency. I had initially wanted her to face the repercussions of her actions, but now wondered if I had been too lenient. I realized I had left Sarah stranded, both physically and emotionally, for too long. So with a steady voice, I finally addressed the issue. Sarah, I began, I've been reflecting on the situation with the car and my behavior. I see now that I may have gone too far. You were genuinely trying to make amends, and I was holding on to my anger. Sarah looked at me, surprised but attentive as I continued. I appreciate you bringing this to my attention. I know I deeply hurt you, but your actions also affected me. I felt isolated, and it made me realize how much I relied on you. I nodded, acknowledging her perspective, and admitted I didn't intend to isolate you, but to make you understand the consequences of your choices. I now realize it may have only pushed us further apart. Her expression softened as she replied, I understand why you felt that way. It was a difficult time for both of us. I felt a wave of relief wash over me as she continued, I can't change the past, but I can promise to be honest and open moving forward. We were both acknowledging our roles in this tumultuous journey. It was not just about her betrayal or my reaction, but about us as a couple navigating the aftermath together. As the days continued to pass, I found myself slowly letting go of the resentment that had once consumed me. I began to allow the possibility of forgiveness into my heart. It wasn't easy, and it didn't happen overnight, but I could feel the walls I had built around my heart starting to crumble. One afternoon, while we were in the living room, I decided to take a leap of faith. How about we plan a weekend getaway? I suggested, trying to infuse some positivity into our lives, somewhere we can reconnect, just the two of us. Her eyes lit up with excitement. That sounds amazing. I love that. We can go back to the cabin we rented last summer. Remember how much fun we had? I smiled at the memory. Yeah, I remember. It was nice to escape for a bit. As we planned the getaway, I felt a renewed sense of hope. Perhaps this was the beginning of, in our quest for a new beginning, a chapter where trust could be nurtured and our bond could be fortified. We found ourselves on the cusp of a transformative weekend. The drive to the cabin was cloaked in a blend of eagerness and apprehension, each mile drawing us closer to the unknown. Could we truly rediscover the ease of companionship and genuine connection untainted by past wounds? Arriving at the cabin, the serenity of the surroundings embraced us. The trees swayed in a gentle dance with the breeze, and the sun painted the landscape with a comforting warmth. It was as if nature itself was offering us a blank canvas, inviting us to rewrite our story together. As we settled into our temporary sanctuary, I observed Sarah inhaling deeply, a radiant smile gracing her features. "Look at this place," she exclaimed, her eyes dancing with excitement. "It's beautiful. I can't believe we're here, in this moment." Throughout the weekend, we embarked on explorations, hiking through the rustic terrain while reminiscing about the cherished memories we had once shared. The specter of betrayal gradually yielded to the laughter and shared experiences, paving the way for a thaw in the frosty tension that had once held us captive. Hand in hand, we traversed the path to healing, embracing each moment as a step back into a sense of normalcy that had eluded us for so long. As the sun set on our time together, a gentle warmth settled over us, a promise of renewal and the possibility of a future built on a foundation of trust, understanding, and the resilient strength of our bond. Sitting beside the crackling fire last night, my heart burning with emotion, I turned to her gratefully. "Thank you for being so open to this," I whispered. "I know it hasn't been easy, and I admire your efforts to restore our trust." Her hand reached for mine, her expression sincere. "I'm grateful too," she responded. "I understand there's a long road ahead, but I am fully dedicated to us. I want to make things right, and I'll do whatever it takes." In that instant, I realized that although the wounds of betrayal would forever shape our journey, it didn't have to be our defining chapter. We held the power to determine our path moving forward. A sense of optimism began to blossom within me, a belief that we could rewrite our story together. Bathed in the warm glow of the fire, I silently vowed to myself. I would permit myself to heal, to offer forgiveness, and to trust once more. While the road ahead would be challenging, every small stride we took together instilled me with confidence that we could step out of the shadows of our past and into a brighter tomorrow. "Here's to new beginnings," I declared, lifting my glass. As I raised my glass to her, she mirrored the gesture. "Here's to fresh starts," she proclaimed, her eyes filled with resolve. Within the tranquil embrace of nature and the reassuring bond between us, a spark of optimism ignited within me. Our path to healing lay ahead, and together we would traverse it, steadfastly advancing. "Thank you for joining me on this expedition," I murmured gratefully. Reading her gaze, I recognized our readiness to confront whatever the future brought.